Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining.
Am I muted again?
Pardon? You're good there. Awesome.
So always start a stream muted.
It's okay. So part of my job here in this part is you as the representative that we've gotten, because a lot are asleep. We have Nash behind the scenes and Miriam's been helping, but we Flutteristas, the Flutter community of which you're a part of, and you've been helping behind the scenes. We thank you guys so much for all of the support you've had. And we've talked about this throughout the conference. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about is what resources are out there for everybody that are part of the Flutter community. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, and one thing, Steph, I mean, you said I'm part of the Flutter community. You're part of the Flutter community.
Yes, that's true.
Okay,
that's
the
true.
Flutteristas are one of the parts that make up the whole. And of course, what we're talking about is the resources available. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about all the parts that make up the whole. One of the resources is the Flutteristas. Okay, so right there, let's start there. Okay. There's the support of the Flutteristas in the Slack channel. There is the support of Flutteristas in events like this and many other things. Then when I talk about the Slack channel, we're talking about if you go to flutter.dev/community, hint for someone to put that on screen, flutter.dev/community, that is where you can find links to all kinds of resources, such as the Flutter community Slack. We have 13,000 people in a Slack. People ask why it's not paid. It's $5 a person. Think about that. $65,000 a month is what it would cost to make this thing paid. So that's just not going to happen. But we have the Flutter community Slack. And then also there is the Flutter community Medium, which is run by a little wizard who is standing behind a curtain pulling levers right now to make all of this happen, like in the Wizard of Oz. All this stuff that you see moving on screen is done by Nash. And this is the same guy who's been driving the Flutter community Medium for years. So Flutter community Medium right now has, last time I checked and hurt my brain trying, it has over 1,200 articles and over 1 million minutes read about every 3 weeks. They say 1 million minutes read every month, but it's more than that. Wow. So if there's an article you're looking for on Flutter, it's there. And Nash had to personally proofread the vast majority of these articles. He's probably proofread and approved 750 of these things himself.
Wow.
So he's got some help, but not as much as we would like to give him.
Gotcha.
So on top of that, we've also got the Discord. Okay. We don't actually, a lot of us don't appear there very often. We should, but there's also the Flutter Discord, which you can reach from that same link. Other resources that you can find from there include the Google group, where you will find people like Eric Seidel, who you saw earlier today, the lead engineer from the Flutter team, answering questions personally. There's the Reddit, also moderated by key people in the Flutter community, such as Marco Sullivan. And there's a bunch more.
Marco Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay.
Marco Sullivan, the Mark you know.
Okay.
He's one of the key moderators of the Reddit.
Oh, good to know.
He's a moderator of Reddit because I don't go near Reddit. Scott doesn't Reddit.
Okay, nope. I'm blushing. Oh, sorry, Mark.
But yeah, and that's the thing is that one of the things is that a lot of these people know each other, where I would like to take a little sidestep if I could, that's unplanned, Steph. Sorry, this was not planned. We had a little bit of a problem earlier today with some trolls, and they were eliminated. Let's put it that way. So trolls went bye-bye. But
can you explain to people out there that aren't sure what you're talking about and what they did? Just so
trolls were saying things and harassing people and using foul language. And we have a bunch of administrators and several channel owners monitoring YouTube, and we made them go away in a hurry. So, but before we did that, we wrote down everyone's names. And then we searched the Flutter community Slack for those names, and we double checked to see if any of those names were Flutter community Medium writers. And we're forwarding those to the people who run the Discord for Flutter. Okay. The thing is, what people need to be aware of is these guidelines about treating people decently are universal across all the different things. And we all know each other. We have all known each other for 3 years.
Yep.
You harass someone in one medium, everybody's going to find out about it. You're going to get kicked everywhere at one time. So
we appreciate that, that people were behind the scenes, making sure and doing the moderating on the comments and elsewhere too. So thank you very much. And I appreciate that.
So yeah, that's just one little difference between the Flutter community and maybe most places you've been. Most places you've been, you get kicked from the one place where it happens. No, we share lists. So, and we all know each other, as I said. So anyway, where are we going from here, Steph?
We are going to have, Sarah is going to be presenting on geometric generative art in Flutter. So if we can bring Sarah on for that.
My name is Sarah Fullmer. Today we are going to talk about generative art in Flutter. So, what will you learn today? We're going to go through the definition of generative art to start, and I will provide you with a couple of examples. And then we will slowly build up the basic tools for how to make your own generative art in Flutter, both static and animated. So, what is generative art? Generative art is a type of art that has been created with the use of an autonomous system, either in whole or in part. An autonomous system is one that can independently determine various features of an artwork that would otherwise require decision-making by the artist. For example, this can be a random number generator or something more complex, such as an algorithm or even machine learning. I was recently asked why I played with generative art at all. Because really, what is the point? And it's a fair question. I suppose that the answer is that it neatly weaves together my interests in both art and coding. I find it to be a lot of fun. And even though it's not going to save the world, I have a good time doing it, and I'm hoping that by the end of this talk, you will have the tools and inspiration to go have some fun doing it yourself in Flutter. So let's look at some examples. This is a piece called Substrate by Jared Tarbell, who is one of the more famous generative artists. And it is from, in fact, a whole series of pictures that was created with an algorithm he created himself that grows perpendicular lines in a kind of crystal-like way with a specific growth rule to create these intricate city-like structures. And then he colored it with a technique that he invented also called sand stroke, which creates this kind of watercolor effect. And I think it's very neat looking. Next, this is a piece by Robert Felker, who is a generative artist that uses Flutter. The previous piece was done in processing, but this one is actually done in Flutter. Robert Felker, he's done some really amazing work and has been a big inspiration for me. You can see this piece and others of his if you follow him on Twitter, Blue Aquile. So now let's get into generative art in Flutter. Why do I create generative art in Flutter instead of processing or some of the other great tools that are out there? Well, I really like the idea of my work one day being accessible on as many platforms as possible, because I personally view the autonomous system used to create the piece itself, in this case code, to be as much a part of the final product as the visual output. So I can't just create a PNG and then distribute it. I want the code to be part of the art itself. And the Flutter rendering engine is an excellent, and it has a friendly API. So I like to create my generative art in Flutter. And also, if I'm honest, I am rather new to the generative art scene, and I have not had time to explore the whole ecosystem yet. I am excited about SuperDeclarative's Flutter processing port currently in the works, which I think should combine the best of both worlds. So let's get down to business with creating generative art in Flutter specifically. You're going to need a widget, of course, and that is called Custom Paint. And you are going to pass Custom Painter something, a Custom Paint, a Custom Painter, which is an interface you implement. So what does this interface look like? There are two methods. You have Paint, which is where the magic happens, basically. It's where you draw on your canvas. And then there's also should repaint, which is important if you're doing animations. If you are doing a static image, then you can simply return false here. Now let's go into Paint a little bit. You'll notice there are those two inputs, canvas and size. So the canvas is what you're drawing on, and it has a coordinate system that you use to place your drawings. And the origin is in the upper left corner, and you can see the direction of the axes in the diagram. The canvas input is the width and height of the canvas you are painting on in pixels. Basically, it's the size of your screen. So let's go through a simple example. This particular painter is going to create a circle. And the position of the circle is an input to the painter, as well as the color. I have arbitrarily chosen the radius to be 80. And it will use something called Paint, which is basically a paintbrush to draw on the canvas. So you can see that I pass the paint into this method called canvas.drawCircle. And it uses that paint to draw a circle with the given center and radius. It's also worth noting that your paintbrush has different styles, and there is the fill style, which is the default and which is being used here. So the circle will be filled in, but you can also have stroke style, which would be to simply outline the shape, and then you can play with the thickness of the stroke. So in this case, we're just going to draw a circle. It's very simple, just to get the basics down. So let's look at that. Okay. Now we're back into widgets, and I have passed my painter into the custom paint widget. But actually, I've passed it twice. Isn't that interesting? Because your custom paint widget can take two painters, a background one and a foreground one. Although the background one is just called Painter, and the foreground one is more helpfully named. And the child is a third layer that goes in between the two. So first, Custom Paint will draw the Painter layer, and then it will create the child, and then it will create the foreground picture. And the reason that we cannot see the green circle in this example is because the painter layer is covered by the child, which is in this case a completely opaque blue container. So if we want to view the green circle that we can see is also being drawn here, we will have to make the container disappear or make it transparent. So I'm going to introduce to you now another tool in your generative art toolbox, which is playing with opacity. So here I have made the container 50% transparent by using this handy function with opacity, which takes in a double from 0 to 1, where 0 is completely transparent and 1 is totally opaque, and this is 0.5, so it's 50% transparent, so we can see the green circle now, and it looks a bit turquoise because it has the blue layer on top. So, mystery solved. Now that we have these this basic framework in place, let's move on. But before we do, I just want to mention that a lot of the examples to come will be using the Dart math library because it contains pi and sine and cosine and other useful trigonometric functions, as well as the pseudo-random number generator, which I use liberally as my autonomous system for these generative art pieces to come. So let's start simple. We're going to start with points in space. In fact, there are no such thing as points on the custom painter. These are tiny circles. And I'm going to draw these points or tiny circles in a grid. More specifically, I have created a plane of tiles. They are invisible, and there's a dot or a circle in the middle of each of them. These are perfectly square tiles, and they just make rows and columns. It's very simple, but you can do a lot of interesting things with tiles. And in fact, tiling is another one of the elemental tools that you will probably want to use once you get into generative art. And you don't have to do rectangular grids. You could make them staggered, or you could do hexagonal tiles, or, well, there's lots of different kind of interesting tiling patterns you can do. But to start, we have this rectangular grid, and it's okay. It looks like a notebook, I suppose, but it's not very interesting. So let's spice things up. Instead of having points in the center of each tile, what if we put a line? So, and then furthermore, what if the line had a direction, and the direction was randomly chosen with random.nextBool? Well, in this case, you would get something interesting, but I have a warning for you first, which is that when you are using a custom painter, the paint function is called many times for each build. So if you are doing some random calculations, for instance, the direction of your line, you want to do that in your widget and then pass the result into the custom painter, as opposed to doing the random calculations in the painter. Otherwise, you'll see your line going like this until it settles on its final random value. So unless you're going for a flickering effect, you should pass in the random calculations instead of doing them in the painter. So if you do that, then you can get something like this. Here, it's the same grid, except instead of dots, I have randomly directed lines. And it's pretty cool. It looks a bit like a strange maze, or I don't know, but I quite like it. And I have to admit that I did steal this idea from Tim Holman, who has an excellent talk on generative art. The link is in the end notes. And not only did I steal this one, but the next one with the diagonal lines, which I think looks even cooler. But in fact, Tim Holman was not the first person to think of this either. If we go back all the way to 1962, they were playing with generative art in Bell Labs in their creative use of computer graphics department. So you can see in the examples on the right that they were doing similar, using an autonomous system to create similar art all the way back in the 60s. So now we've created tiles with lines. Let's move on to shapes. On the canvas, there are a lot of different shapes you can draw. You can see some of them here. We are going to be looking at rectangles and circles, but if you get excited about this and look at the docs, there are many other things you can do. So how about, instead of drawing little points at each of those tile centers, we made bigger circles and we gave them some more interesting colors. Well, here, it does get a bit more interesting. The position is still completely fixed, but now the colors are randomly selected. And the radiuses are also ordered. But I have created a color palette and selected randomly from that palette to lay these circles on top of each other. It's worth noting that if you want to randomly select your colors, I do not recommend doing it completely randomly, because if you randomly select an RGB value, it will probably be gray or brown or some kind of gray-brown. It's not pretty. So you want to create your own palette of colors you think would look good together and then select from that. So that's what I've done here. And this is pretty cool. It kind of looks like some kind of wallpaper. I don't know, but I think it could be more interesting. What if we started messing around with the opacity, for instance, or the size of the radiuses? So I'm going to do that now. This is now a hexagonal grid instead of the original rectangular one, because I think hexes go a bit nicer with circles. And the radius is now allowed to be randomly determined for the small, middle, and large circles, and they can go larger than the size of the grid. So we get an overlapping effect, which I think with the opacity being tweaked makes an interesting bubble effect. And I think this is quite nice, but I also think we can do better. Because what if, in addition to the shape, in addition to the size and the opacity, we also made the shape a little more random and in fact made the existence random. So does it appear or does it not? So if we do all of that, you get something like this. And I think we've arrived at something that is interesting, and I would print it out and put it on a t-shirt, put it on a magnet, I don't know. And there it is. And the thing I like about this is that it's unique. I will never be able to make this again with my code unless I do it manually. But the generative art, the generative code that created this will not produce the same one again. Well, you know, the universe is very long, so maybe it will one day, but it's unlikely. So we've done a lot of cool things with shapes. And what about curves? We can do interesting things with curves. In the custom painter, curves are created using something called a path, which is either a straight line interpolated between 2 points, or basically a Bezier curve. And you can create paths to be whatever shape you want, basically by connecting or adding together paths which are constructed from lines and various kinds of Bezier curves, basically. So if you do that, you can draw basically anything you want. So while I was exploring the custom painter, I thought I would like to make some flowers. I like flowers. So I decided to use Bezier curves to create some digital origami paper. And here you can see that the centers are just circles, and the petals are a Bezier curve. And then inside each petal, it's a line. And this is just, I used some trigonometry to make it go around the circle. And then the background is a tiling of arcs that are nested. And then it's just these simple things put together, and you have what I think is a kind of nice picture. So it is nice, but it's also static. So what if we moved on and started animating? Well, there are a lot of ways to do animations in Flutter. And if you want to animate standard widgets like buttons, or if you want to do cool page transitions, there are some very nice built-in implicit animations that you can do. And this is not about that. This is about something called explicit animations, which is a more bespoke kind of animation that you control at a lower level. And this is how you can animate in your custom painter. So let's get into that. In order to animate in your custom painter, you will have to pass it a progress value, which is basically a point in time. And then you use that point in time as the input to a function that determines position. And then it runs, and at 60 frames per second, it updates, and you see your whatever moving around the screen. Again, this will make liberal use of Dart math. So let's look at an example. At the widget level, you want to use something called a single ticker provider state mixin. If I was going to have multiple animations running in parallel, I would want to use something called a multiple ticker providers. But since I only have one in this case, it's a single. And the question is, what is a ticker provider? And it's basically a clock that ticks for you, and you use it to keep track of time as you run through the animation. And you pass it into your animation controller, which you use to start and stop your animation. And you can see that there is also the animation object, which I have called a tween double, which is rather mysterious sounding if you've never heard of it before. But a tween is just a thing that interpolates between a set of given values, and in this case, a double. And I haven't given any other parameters, so the default is that it will run from 0 to 1 over the given duration. And it will interpolate it and do all of that hard work for me, so I can just take the output value of the controller to keep track of time in my animation. So in order to start and stop your controller, you can use some simple functions. There is controller forward, and if you want it to go on forever, you will do controller repeat instead, because controller forward will only run it once. And then once you stop it, it's just controller stop. It's very simple. And the typical way to use this is to either start your animation in the when the page loads, or you can tie it to some kind of play pause button, which is what you see here. So you have your controller. It's outputting a value from the ticker provider that's been calculated with the tween and the duration, and you can take that value and you can pass it into your custom painter, which you see here. And I'm going to pass it into something called Ptolemy Painter, which we can now go look at and see how we're using the progress value. It's a very simple example, actually. All I'm doing is making a point go in a circle. And the position of the point is calculated using the progress value. So let's see what that looks like. So this animation is the point moving around, which we've calculated, and then I draw lines between the fixed points on the circle and the moving point. And those are just, there's no calculations with those. I'm just drawing them between the points as it's calculated. And then the lines you see on the left are, again, mirroring the length of the chords in the circle. And the whole point is to illustrate that the longest chord is the sum of the two shorter chords. It's a special case of Ptolemy's theorem. And you can read more about it on Wikipedia. It's very interesting. So now we can see how we can move something, have its position move around, and also make a straight line grow and shrink. But what if we wanted to make a line that wasn't just a straight line grow? What if it was on a curvy path? What if we wanted to make a spiral grow, for instance? Well, in that case, we need to use something called a path, which we went over before. And in order to draw it, we will have to use something called path metrics, which is an object that you calculate for a given path that just contains a whole bunch of different kind of information about the path. And it's very intensive to calculate this, so it's better to just do it once for a given path and then use what you've calculated. And then you can take your progress value and using the path metrics, draw the path based on the progress value. And if you do all of that, you put it together, and here you can see a spiral grow, which is a bit more tricky than just making a line. And that's it, almost. I have one more trick to share. And remember those flowers that we looked at before? I had actually thought that it would be nice to have them float around as if they were on the surface of some water, or that they kind of looked like fish floating around or something. And I tried to animate them using the technique that I just explained by taking the controller value and passing to the custom painter, and then using the custom painter to determine the position. And it worked fine in desktop, but it was very janky in both Android and iOS devices. I think there was just too many computations. So I gave up on it, to be honest. But then I got a tip that the Flutter engine, which I already knew was very good, it does some super optimizations to show many widgets on a screen at once, even if they're moving around. So if I wanted to show these objects moving around, maybe I could animate it at the widget level instead of the custom painter level. So here I have instead made many individual custom painters with the flowers and put them in a stack. And then the position of the elements in the stack is what is being changed here. And the result is much smoother. So if you want to take advantage of the Flutter render engine for animations, this is another tool in your tool belt. So let's just review what we've learned. First, we talked about what is generative art, and we went through the basics of custom paint and painter and the paintbrush, and we built up from points to lines to shapes to curves and made some interesting pieces. And after that, we finally made some animations with those same tools. And I hope that this has given you an idea of what you can do in Flutter. And if you find it inspiring, these slides will be available, and also the code is available, and there are links to some of my inspiration there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can just reach out. DMs are open. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I cannot wait to try that myself. And Scott, what do you think? I know you.
I'm in awe of Sarah's skills, not only with Flutter, but I wish I could be twins and answer questions in YouTube while presenting at the same time. That is awesome.
She's very talented. Totally,
Yes.
very, very talented.
Totally.
Speaking of talented, our next presenter is Renuka, and she is presenting on unfolding a web app with Flutter 2. Renuka, take it away.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining this session. I'm a Renuka Kelkar. I'm a founder at Tech Power Girls. I'm a freelance mobile app developer, and I'm also doing the web designing and development from last 15 years. I'm currently running the Tech Power Girls community. The Tech Power Girls community is the tech community that empower the woman and especially the mom who are having 5+ years of gap in their IT career. So in this community, we have chosen as a Flutter as a tool to empower these women. In this community, we help them to start learning Flutter from the scratch. We help them to build their confidence. We help them to build their portfolio. So our main aim is to make them ready for the job market. So this is little bit info about the Tech Power Girls. So now everyone knows that web is now available in stable. So what kind of websites or what kind of web app you can currently build with the Flutter? So in this current scenario, Flutter Web supports a progressive web application. A progressive web application, it has its own benefits. So it is very easy to share. You don't need to install anywhere. You can have the best of both of the native desktop application functionality with the functionality of web. So you can reach out the more audience or more user using this progressive web application. You can also have the functionality of like a push notification, location detection. So all these things you can easily have that kind of facility in your app using the progressive web application. So this is really good. So second thing is that you can create a single page application with Flutter. So Flutter is not supporting right now with the SEO things. So I think SEO is a really major part when you develop the websites. So that's why you can develop the web application, not the websites. Because if you're thinking to develop any website or web application, which is more concentrated on the content and you need to have the SEO facility, then the Flutter is not a good choice for you. If you are doing any web application, which is more concentrated on the UI and their functionality, then that is a really good option for you. You can develop or expand your already built mobile apps to the web app, which will give you more facility to connect with the more audience. So these are some scenario where you can develop your web application with Flutter. So tell me, how many of you have created your first web application with the Flutter? So frankly speaking, when I was just waiting to get Flutter web gets stable, and after that I started working with the Flutter web. So because of this 30-day challenge, many people join and connect with the Flutter community. So they are really excited when this announcement is done, and they are very excited to start working with the Flutter web. But many peoples are asking this question: how to start with the Flutter web? So, is there any good way to start with that? I think Flutter team has given a really good documentation for that. So there are 4 steps you can follow and start working with your first Flutter web app. So step 1 is that to enable the web development. So for to enable the web in your Flutter project, you should need to upgrade your Flutter with the latest version. Then it's a really good practice to have run the Flutter doctor command and check if everything is installed properly or not. If you got all the ticks, then there is no issue found. Then you can check the devices, what kind of devices you can see on your device list. So you can see the Chrome is option to see your Flutter web app. So I think after that, if you want to build the Flutter web app to your existing mobile app, then you just need to write the Flutter create command on your terminal, and it will automatically create the directory for web on your existing mobile app. So then what is step 2? The step 2 is about the creating a UI. So when you think about the web, then you are thinking about, there are so many questions coming in my mind. Still, I am a web developer from last 15 years. When I started working, developing the website for the mobile, so I always have that approach that mobile first. You should design or you should develop first mobile website, and then you can develop the web. So I have that question in my mind that what should I do when I develop my web app? Should I follow the same rule, or should I use the do that simultaneously with the both views together? So many questions. Can I use the responsive app or can I create adaptive app? Which kind of widgets I'm going to use to develop this? Is there any packages which help me to build this kind of functionality? What kind of navigation do I really need to develop Flutter web? Can I build a single page application, or can I create a multi-page application? So many questions, right? When you try something new first time, that time you are completely confused, right? So this is the case with me actually. So that's why I have searched on this, and I have found some good solution for that. So if you haven't tried yet any Flutter web application, so maybe these tips and tricks will help you to build your first web app. So let's see what is that. So first thing is the layout builder. So layout builder is a basic widget which we can use to build the responsive or adaptive layout in Flutter. So what layout builder gives us? So layout builder gives us the builder function which with the parameter of the constraint. So this constraint parameter where you can create your own constraint with the maximum width more than 800, maximum width, minimum width, and you can create the constraint according to your need, and you can customize your UI. Just you can see here I have created the constraint of if my window size is greater than 800, then I'm going to use the column row. If it is less than 800, then I'm going to use the column. So this kind of functionality you can create, and you can see, let me show you how I have created this layout. So here this is, you can see I have used the row. All the element is aligned horizontally, and if you change to the web to the mobile, the screen size is minimum 800, then you can see it is all vertically aligned. So this is a very good option. You can use the layout builder and start creating customizing your UI according to your need. The second thing I want to show you that there is a package called the responsive builder. which is, I think this is a wrapper around the layout builder. It will give you some ready-made inbuilt widgets which help us to build the responsive layout easily. So responsive builder gives us a responsive builder widget, orientation layout builder widget, where you can customize your UI according to the orientation of your device. If you want to customize your UI according to the screen type of your screen type, like a mobile for the tablet, then the separate UI for the desktop and watch. So you can customize that using this widget. Then the next thing is the global screen breakpoint. So you can create your own breakpoints. You can decide your own breakpoints for according to your need. So these are the some inbuilt widgets which help you to build your responsive layout easily. I would like to introduce one more package which is called Velocity X. So I think Velocity X is a minimalistic UI Flutter framework help to build the UI very easy and fast way. So it is also giving us 4 different widgets which is help us to build the UI easily. So first widget is a build context, which is similarly work as like a media query dot off. The second widget I'm going to show you that VX device. So in this VX device widget, you can customize your UI according to the device size. So if you want to have the different UI for the mobile or the different UI for the web, you can easily customize that. But if you have any more need or more requirement to have the customization of your each and every size of your window of your website or web app, then you can use the VX responsive, where you can get more command or where you can get a more option to design your UI according to your size of your windows. So like a extra small, small, medium, large. So all these things you can easily manipulate with using the VX responsive widget. The next widget is a VX layout. So VX layout, where also same as a layout builder, where you can specify the size of your window and you can customize your UI according to that. So this is really pretty much easy to use and create a fast UI. So let me show you how I have created this demo app using the Velocity X. So you can see everything is horizontally aligned and it is a responsive in the nature. If you change the size of the window, then it will change the layout as well. You can change the navigation as well. So this is pretty much easy using the Velocity X. So after now we have decided what kind of layout we are going to create. We are already enabled the web in our project. So what is the next step? The next step is that how to do the navigation, because the navigation is a really important part while developing any app, right? So while developing any web app, you can see when you see first time, you can see the hash in your URL, right? So the URL strategy package is it's very easy to use to remove this hash from your URL. So you just add the dependency of URL strategy inside your app and just create this code, and it's pretty much easy and straightforward. The second thing is that is a URL launcher or the hyperlink. In a website development, hyperlink is a very major part from which page you are going, from which page you are coming. So are you going to create a navigation inside your website only or web app only, or are you going to give any links outside your app? And is that page open on the same window, or is that open on the another window? So these kind of functionality you need to think about when you think about the web. So for that you can use the URL launcher, Flutter has introduced the new widget called the link widget, which help you to create this functionality very easily. So the next part is that how the navigation works in Flutter web, so or any web application. So when you create any mobile app with using the navigator one, that time you just creating the functionality like a push notification and pop notification, and you are working with that. But for the web, you need to declarative type of functionality, type of navigation in your application. So I think that all things this covers within Navigator 2, where you have to sync your URL and you have to sync your web history with your navigation. So you should use the Navigator 2 to do the navigation in for your Flutter web project. For the beginners or the many people or many beginners are getting more feeling more difficult to how to use the navigator tool. So is there any packages or any wrapper around the navigator tool which help us to build this functionality easily? Then yes, there are certain packages which help you to build this easily. So you can use the GetX, then you can use the Fluoro, Beamer, where you can create deep linking or the nested navigation easily for your web project. So now the navigation part is also done. What is the next step, right? The next fourth step is the deploying the web app. So you know that when you deploy your mobile app, you know that you have to deploy on the iOS or Android or Play Store. But how to deploy your web app? So there are certain options available to deploy your web app. So first thing, you can use the Firebase hosting, you can use the GitHub pages, you can use the Google Cloud hosting, you can use the Code Magic. There are certain many options available to deploy your app. So I'm going to show you here how to use the GitHub pages to deploy your first web application. So you can see here I have created a new repository for the Tech Power Girls. The name repository name should be same as your username. Then you have to create that repository. So username.github.io is the repository name. I have just created that now. The next step is that you have to create, upload the file from the web folder, from your build folder, from the Flutter project. So you can see here I'm going to the my build folder. Inside that build folder, the web folder, I'm just copying the all the file from that. I'm copy pasting and just pasting all the files here. And then the next step is that you just need to commit the code. So I just try to commit this code. And the next step is just see, you can check your output. So you can see I have just committed the changes, and if you click on the GitHub pages, so now you can see he is active, and you copy and paste and put that link on the browser. You can see your first web application. So this process is really straightforward and easy. You can do it. So this is the fourth step you can follow and create your first web application. I hope you can get more information about how to create that. If you have any question related to this, or if you have any, if you need any help to for developing your first web application, you can easily reach out to me, reach out to our Tech Power Girls. We have created whatever I have shown in this presentation, all the projects on my GitHub repository. You can go and check it, the code from there as well. So thanks for joining this session, and thanks Flutterista to giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge with you all. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Renuka, and thank you very much for presenting. Next, we're going to have Danielle, and she's going to give us a little insight to an interview she just did.
Well, I'm really just going to announce it, I think. But
okay.
The whole point here is the fact that we've been collecting stuff for this conference for a while, and not everybody could be here today. So last week I had the pleasure of introducing Jen Magder from the tools area there at Google, which is kind of neat. And if you would, Nash, let's play the video.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jen. I've been a Google engineer on the Flutter team for the last 2 years. Right now, I mostly work on the Flutter command line tool. So if you've ever run Flutter Create or Flutter Doctor from the command line, or really if you've ever launched a Flutter app at all, because that's what the IDE is talking to under the covers. So mostly what I focus on is developer flows for iOS and macOS. So getting your app compiled, installed, launched, debuggable on those platforms.
Well, that's great. And yes, we all use that every time we launch an app. And I use a Mac, so I really use it every time.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Flutter, we know it's open source, and we know that Google is kind of the owner of it. Can you talk a little bit about Google's main responsibility when it comes to Flutter?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that Google's necessarily the owner of it. It's more that I think Google sets the overall direction of the product. So marketing things like when to call it Flutter 2, but also Google has the most full-time engineers working on the product. So therefore, the most commits, design docs, practical things like that. So I think that Google has responsibility to the Flutter ecosystem. So most packages and plugins are open source, but are just totally unaffiliated with Google. So the responsibility there is to make sure that the ecosystem is healthy and that contributors are empowered to make high quality plugins. Another thing that I think Google brings to the table there is testing. So there's quite a few first party Google products that are built with Flutter at this point. So Google Pay, for example. So we're able to leverage Google scale testing infrastructure to detect behavior and performance regressions, things like that. But I'd say most importantly, Flutter was started at Google, but it's open source. It doesn't end at Google. So we feel a responsibility to encourage a culture of transparency and to make the community feel as welcoming as possible. So like, as you know, as we all know, online communities, I think, have a tendency to kind of slide into toxicity. So we think that if there's a culture of respect in place, it's kind of self-perpetuating, that the community itself will enforce it.
Well, that sounds wonderful, and that is part of the amazing thing that Google does with us, I think, for sure. But bringing up into that, how does Google interact with the open source contributors and maybe the community at large?
So first of all, I'd say Flutter's SDK is the source code and documentation is available for anyone to look at. Like in the last 6 months, I think we've had something like 4,000 contributors, or sorry, 4,000 pull requests from like 300 contributors. So that's actually like quite a lot of contributors for any code base. So some of those contributors are Google engineers like me. Some are hobbyist programmers. Some are engineers working at big companies like, say, Microsoft, who are invested in making Flutter work on their platform. And all of those different kinds of contributors, they fix bugs, write documentation, but even like write and implement longer term design docs and like feature proposals. So that's not just Google engineers doing that. And then our developer relations team obviously interacts with the community. So they engage with community contributors to make sure that our sample apps are like relevant to real world design patterns and development patterns and problems that you might see in the wild. And they pull in experts like you, Danielle, for videos like The Boring Show. By the way, Andrew wants me to say hi. And then, as I mentioned, like the Flutter ecosystem is open source. So Google has collaborated with contributors on projects like Flutter Plus, which is a collection of like high quality plugins, and just to make sure that they have support and like a solid foundation.
Well, that's really good, and yeah, we love Nilay and Andrew and Fitz and Philip, and definitely all of them are
yeah, it's a collection
we get to work
personalities.
with.
Yeah,
And of course, now we get to love you.
Huh.
So why is the community valuable for Flutter's code base, though? We've said there's a lot of community involvement, but why do we care?
So Flutter apps can be developed on Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and then the app itself can be deployed on Android, iOS, web, Linux, Windows. I mean, the list keeps growing. But there's like a limited number of Google engineers on the Flutter team. So just inevitably there's gaps in our knowledge. So for example, like I know a lot about Mac OS and iOS development, but I don't know as much about Windows or whatever your favorite Linux distro is. So community members a lot of times know things that we don't. So they file issues and pull requests, and they create pull requests about how things don't work, but also not just bugs, but maybe things don't work idiomatically on a platform that they just know a lot better than us. So they step into those gaps.
Okay, well, and I have often heard that a great way to get started contributing is to file a bug. So what makes a good bug report?
So I would definitely encourage anyone who notices a bug in Flutter to file an issue on our GitHub issue tracker. And you do not need to be an expert in Flutter to do this. Like some of the best issues I've ever seen are from users who are totally new to Flutter. So even if you find something, not just a bug, but even if you find something confusing or it's like not working the way you expected, you should definitely file an issue, because we'll consider that a request for improved documentation, because we didn't give you the information you needed to be successful in the first run. And then just like a personal plea, like do it for me. If you figure out a workaround to your bug, if it's, you figured out how to work around the problem, please still file an issue, because we want to fix the underlying issue. We don't want all of our users to have to figure out the work that you did and then apply it. So we want to actually fix the problem for everyone.
Sure, and I'm sure often the workaround can give a good clue as to what's actually going wrong too.
Totally. Tell us what you did to work around it. Then, I mean, that's the biggest clue you can give us.
Absolutely. Okay, well, if we're moving along with our journey as being, healthy community members, maybe the next thing we do is go find an issue and fix it. What makes a good pull request?
So what makes a good pull request? So the pull request itself is like a change that you're making to the code, and you're requesting that the pull request be merged into the Flutter code base. So those changes should generally fix one thing at a time. The description itself should explain what the change does and have a reference to a GitHub issue that maybe explains a little more about what you're actually fixing. The more information you can give your reviewers about that, the better. So the change should, almost without exception, include tests, because you're like, oh, this is kind of a trivial change. Do I need tests? Yes. Make sure that you include unit tests, integration tests. There's a lot of examples in her code base, so you should be able to find something. And then once you actually create the pull request, it will be reviewed by 1 or 2 members of the Flutter team. So that's not necessarily Google engineers. And that could involve a good amount of back and forth. Reviewers think of corner cases that the author didn't necessarily. And I think that process can be really frustrating for particularly first-time contributors, because you think, oh, you had a bug and I'm giving you a present. I'm fixing your bug. It's time to merge it, right? But it's a process for all of us, the review process. I mean, personally, I think that my code is better after being reviewed and like picked apart. So yeah, it can be frustrating, and sometimes it can take a lot longer than you think it should, but overall it's good for the health of the product. And then once it's fixed up, the reviewers are happy with it, all the pre-submit unit tests pass, then they'll approve it. And then at that point, it'll be merged into the code base.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you very much. And finally, we're here as the Flutterista conference, and while we've got lots of people here of all kinds of backgrounds, we are concerned with issues that related to Flutteristas. So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like working at Google as a female? Yeah,
so personally, I've always felt supported in my career and my work-life balance. But when I look around the Flutter team, I think that there is serious work that needs to be done on our team to reflect the wide range of backgrounds and perspectives and experiences that Flutter app developers and the Flutter users actually have. So I think that's a good time to mention that we're hiring. You can any of you, please check out the open positions at flutter.dev/jobs. We have open positions right now on the plugins team, the web team, the graphics engine team. We're looking for a technical program manager, a user experience researcher. They have a really cool job. They conduct surveys and do user interviews. So whatever your interest is, there's a large range of opportunities available on the team. So if you have experience with Flutter, that's great. That's just an invaluable perspective. But you do not need to be a Flutter expert to apply. I mean, I had never written a line of Dart code before I started on the team. I was the opposite of a Flutter expert. So if you are interested in the work, if this appeals to you at all, then don't rule yourself out. Like, please apply because we need you.
Absolutely, and once again, our audience is more than just Flutteristas. So I mean, we're appealing to anybody that would like to do it and can bring in their own experiences. We think
Definitely.
that'd be amazing. So, well, thank you very much, Jen. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, great talking to you, Daniel.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I really appreciate Danielle recording our interview so we were able to see that. If you will continue to join us, now we're going to have Teresa present how to build Flutter with BDD. Take it away, Teresa.
We have launched an alpha version of the app to the Indian market, made by a small group of engineers to support Tide's mission of global platform. Tide is UK leading digital financial platform. We support business owners from set up their business. For example, our users can raise, send, and automatically chase invoices, as well as being notified when they are paid. Today, I'm going to demo BDD in a Flutter project. I have to say that I actually didn't believe in BDD in the beginning. I thought BDD is just another testing tool. Luckily, my company has decided to explore it. We had 3 days workshop with BDD expert back in February 2020. The entire dev team was very excited about it. We learned BDD together and create plans of how we can adapt to it in our team. But then a few weeks later, we went into lockdown. Anyhow, we still managed to adapt BDD, starting from being imperfect, and we're slowly learning through the team collaboration. Before we go into more discussions, let me know if those scenarios sounds familiar to you. When a PO, product owner, requires to validate email address, a typical case can be that Android engineers allow using special characters like plus. iOS consider it as invalid address. So the code passes unit test and went into production. And a few months later, the users complain that they can't log in to their account on their iOS mobile after registering from Android tablet. So have you had similar experience? Another situation, when engineer wasn't sure about whether he or she should allow special character in username. The engineer asked this question to the PO. Unfortunately, the PO is engaged into a half-day product meeting, so he can't respond quickly. The engineer, after waiting for 2 hours, he decided to take a guess and take a risk, but he also made a note to himself to make this change later. But one thing after another, they both forgot about it. So the code went to production. And I'm sure you run into some cases like this, right, Rory? especially if you work with teams in different locations where time zone can be an issue. Another situation, when a QA found a bug and he created a bug ticket, the PO suggests this isn't a bug, but an incomplete feature. The engineer argues that he wasn't even aware of it. So again, this is something that developers might have to deal with when a bug isn't a bug, but it's lost detail which was never discussed. So if you have experienced those situations, it's probably time to adopt BDD. Now let's see, right? What is BDD? It stands for Behavior-Driven Development. It's a tool that engages people to work together, sharing a common language. For example, it can be pure English. It started as a tool to help people understand how to do test-driven development better. Later on, it was adopted by Agile. So although BDD concerns about testing behaviors, but fundamentally, it's a process. It's not a testing tool. So in short, you can practice BDD without testing code, but you are not practicing BDD if you skip the process to just test the code. So now let me ask you one question, and you can keep the answer with you, and we can find out the actual answer towards the end of the session. So the question is, how many people should be involved in BDD process? How many people should be involved in BDD process? Okay, so it's very safe to say that if your project is testable, it means somehow your code is clean. You code once and you think twice. So someone might ask, why do I want to test my function of 1 + 1? I know the result is always 2. Well, as of today, yes. But what if someone wants to refactor or make changes? How do we know his change won't impact my function? Only running tests give us the confidence and to refactor the code. And this is where BDD and TDD connects. You will start with BDD process, but in the end, the actual acceptance tests are carried out with TDD manner. And you will find out why in the next few slides. So if you are working in a company with cross-functional teams, introducing BDD is very simple. You can pick 1 or 2 small teams to spearhead the first BDD project, then gradually roll it out everywhere. This is what we did at Tide. And luckily, because I'm working on a greenfield project with a new tech stack, we use Flutter, and then we introduced BDD in the beginning of the project. So here you can see it's a simple Gherkin syntax. Given the mission is to get things done right and to reduce creating tech debt for the future self when working with the new project, then we used BDD. Let's see how these Gherkin scenarios look like in the Flutter code. The keyword given are the presetting you need for your tests. So usually given contains all the happy paths and unhappy paths. For example, if you are creating a function of making payment, you use a given to set up success payment, error payment, and many other conditions. Here, our condition is to get things done right and to reduce possible tech debt for the future. So when this keyword, when, is a trigger of the action, it specifies the case and bring up the outcome of the then condition. So this is a very first glance of how BDD looks like in Flutter. We will go through an actual example of it later. So actually, BDD isn't very different from the actual usual story refinement. It doesn't really add extra time in the process. So first, we start from story mapping and discovery. So the PO creates stories in backlog, adding user acceptance criteria, followed by example mapping with 3 amigos. They are product owner, developers, and testers. So 3 amigos. We will discuss each step in the next few slides, but mainly focus on example mapping. But remember, there are 4 steps in BDD process. Now, try again with my question. How many people do you think we need in BDD process? I think you got it now, right? So let's look at BDD steps, right? Step 1. Because it's a process, the discovery sits at the core. During discovery, the team and the PO discuss together the story. And if during the process, you noticed your refinement session has been extended a bit longer, it might be because you are doing BDD right. In a typical project, the PO creates story and explain it to engineers, right? And the QA will estimate the testing separately. In a BDD project, the PO creates story, same, right? And the detail of the story is discussed in refinement session. This is what we call example mapping. In the end, the testers and developers will write testing cases together. So you see this is where BDD is a bit different from the traditional project process. Step 2, backlog. When developers are working in Sprint N, product owners are creating Sprint N+1 stories in backlog. At this point, the stories are filled with scope of the feature, and they will be converted into BDD scenarios in example mapping session. This is an example of the ticket in the backlog. The story is described from the user's point of view. The story is to create a user profile with user acceptance criteria, with login and validation. And this is a ticket example. And of course, when it's in backlog, it doesn't contain any scenarios. So typically, the story before refinement should contain information about scope of the ticket, description, design link, if there is one, and a detailed UAC, user acceptance criteria. So once we have stories in the backlog and it's ready to be implemented, the next step is to refine it. So in BDD process, this step is called example mapping. In example mapping, product owner decides what needs to go into the sprint, while testers bring edge cases and developers add more details. And thanks for the invention of Post-it notes, the meeting is immersively colorful. In a real example mapping session, the board usually looks like this. The PO copies the story and rules into a board. At this stage, there's no examples for each rule, and we know nothing about it. So the current board looks exactly like what the ticket is. The story is to create user profile with 3 fields: the email, the address, and the name. So rule 1 is to validate email address. Rule 2 is to validate postcode, and it should be a UK postcode. Rule 3 is that the name must contain minimum 6 characters, and the 4 is to create the profile if all 3 fields are valid. The outcome of this example mapping is to fill up each rule with examples. And let's see how that's done. Right, so we will work on the rules one by one. Here, rule 1 is to validate email address. Given a rule that we must validate email address when creating a user profile, and examples can be extended to 100 and more. Very importantly, you only allowed to give examples for this rule, and you shouldn't create rules for rules. So, for example, you are not supposed to create examples like email address should not contain white space. This is a rule, right? But you should simply write it down, write this email down with white space, and you can mark it with invalid and give some note to it. So every content you write here, they will turn into the given data in your tests later on. So you need to provide both valid and invalid examples. And those examples will turn into data for your tests later on. The email validation is a great example because there are thousands of invalid rules. And in the end, you might need to split this rule into another story, or maybe you will decide to use a pre-made library instead. And of course, during the example mapping process, there will be various questions, right? The PO need to help to clarify the answer for them. For things that if he can't answer during the example mapping, the question should be noted down on the side in the red color notes. So as you continue, your board will be full of examples and questions. Here, a story has multiple rules, but if you have too many of them, indicates the story is too big and it should be sliced into multiple stories. A rule summarizes a bunch of examples, and an endless list of examples indicates the rule is overcomplicated. Question lead us into deeper conversation, and showing too many red cards implies the story is not ready. So running example mapping really help you to identify gaps in your story, because there are multiple ways to interpret creating a user profile. So the PO might have one way of thinking, where developers might have another. So how can you know you are implementing the right feature without fully understanding it? Another advantage of having BDD is because they will be turned into acceptance tests, and this will become the automation testing of your project. So imagine when you finish a feature and you have unit tests covering that feature, right? But then you probably will ask the QA to do some manual testing before you can merge your tickets. Having BDD means you can remove this manual testing before merge, because all this behavior are tested through code. And another example of how BDD tests look like in Flutter project. So this is how the file system works in a Flutter project. First, you need to enable gherkin, and we will talk about gherkin in another slide. So gherkin, in short, imagine it's a syntax. So first, you need to enable gherkin and Cucumber plugin in your selected IDE. Cucumber is a tool that supports BDD, so you can write a simple English with gherkin. Then in your acceptance tests folder, there's usually at least 3 files. One to initialize the tests, and in our case, we call it acceptance tests.dart. There are two more folders with name feature and steps. The feature folder contains all the feature files. It's the one with the green icon in front. This is where we list gherkin syntax. The step folders contains all the Dart file which implement the specifications written in a feature file. So the last step, 4, is gherkin. Remember, we have 4 steps in BDD process. Last one is gherkin. Now, you may ask, right, what is gherkin? It's a language, it's a syntax, it's a set of special keywords to give structure to execute some specifications. And most lines in a gherkin document start with one of the keywords. And this is what gherkin syntax looks like in Flutter from our previous example. So scenario is the business rule from example mapping. Remember the blue stickers we had in example mapping. So those 4 rules will turn into scenarios. For example, validate email address, postcode, and name. This is where example mapping connects to our project in the automation testing process. This is why BDD is a process to understand the feature we need to build. And because all the discoveries will become part of our code in the end. The keyword given is some context in the setup, and it's not included in the example mapping. And you might have multiple given conditions. So given isn't shown in the example mapping, but it's very obvious, right? This is when a set of data are given or being passed to our application. So given identifies the parameters in a function. The keyword 1 is the action be performed. So like invoke or to create. Only one is needed because there should be only one trigger for your feature. The last keyword then it assert the expected behavior, and there might be multiple outcomes. So this is a result of our function, whether a given input is accepted or failed. So we don't worry about how the email is invalid. This is what we use unit test for. And we only care about the behavior after each action. So we discussed a lot about BDD and the theory of BDD. Let's say some code in Flutter from the same example. Or let's say Dart, right? And to be more precise, because BDD concerns about behavior, not UI. So when you do tests in BDD, if your code is structured in a clean architecture way, you shouldn't use any framework related to code in the BDD acceptance tests. In this code example, we used a library. So you need to add the library in your project YAML file, right? And create a directory, a folder at the root level of your project. You can call it anything. And in here, we have the acceptance tests.dart, the file. And it has functions to invoke our tests. The next step is to create feature file that contains the gherkin scenarios. And you might have multiple scenarios given then in one feature file, and it's okay. Copy exact same word from your feature file into the test steps. If the wording doesn't match, your test will fail. And depends on how your project is structured. We use use case to connect repository and presenter. So the use case is what we are testing here. And because it contains the actual behavior and actions, By this point, your project should be full of warnings and suggests the classes that exist. This is where BDD and TDD connects. So TDD is related to test first concept. Fundamentally, it's a technical tool, where BDD focuses on the process, ensuring we are clear about what we're building, why we are building it, and how we test it. So now we just need to implement the use case, repository, and data layer in the actual code. So in the end, once you've taken out all the warnings, run the following command to execute the tests. And if you use a Jira, you can sync it up with a plugin called Living Documentation. This is something that Jira comes very handy. And once you have this plugin and you run all your tests, then you can see all your scenarios from BDD will show up in Jira, and you can share it with your team. Okay, it's almost towards the end of this talk. Let's have a recap. So in BDD, the user story delivers value to the end user, and it changes behavior of a domain, like create user profile, modify a playlist, upload invoices. The domain expert, the PO or the business analyst, they create stories in backlog with user acceptance criteria. Then each of the user acceptance criteria will become a business rule. Remember the blue stickers, right, in our example mapping. And each rule will be converted as one acceptance scenarios in the Gherkin syntax. And most importantly, BDD is not unit test and is not UI test either. So when should you contact a BDD session? So if you run bi-weekly sprint, let's say if your sprint starts from Wednesday, and you can run a BDD refinement session in the following midweek. And here are some examples of the tests, right? UI tests concerned about UI effect, like the margin, the size of a button, and its status. Unit tests focus on a piece of function, and user acceptance tests verifies the product and the behavior meets specific criteria by the user. So this is a very brief discussion of BDD process with some example in Flutter. Hope you like it. I've written an article about it in my Medium blog. If you like some extending reading. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.
Oh, Teresa, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have to rewatch that. How about you, Scott?
I'm also going to check out the Medium
Oh,
art.
you're on mute.
I shouldn't be. Testing 1, 2.
Can't hear you. It's okay.
That.
Yeah, that's okay. So next we're going to go and we're going to listen to Mais, and she's going to be talking about boring Flutter boring Flutter development. Take it away, Mais.
Hi, this is Mais Alheraki. I'm a Flutter GDE and a software engineer. I currently work as a Flutter developer, and I wanted to talk today about some simple tips, wisdoms, whatever you can call it, that helped me a lot to improve as a Flutter developer. My talk is titled Boring Flutter Development and More, as the tips I'm gonna mention are usually not that much shiny and exciting, but they are so important for developers. Flutter is full of fun. In a matter of 3 years, lots of developers have fallen in love with it. It grew dramatically. Recently, we've been to Flutter Engage, and truly the engagement with the event was massive. Many new developers are switching to Flutter every day. Flutter 2.0 was announced, web is now stable, and desktop 6 platforms with one code base. Looks like a dream that came true. But let's put all of this aside and talk about what a lot of developers forget when they first get started with Flutter. Regardless of how amazing it is, development isn't only widgets. It's something broader. Flutter is the tool. It's a perfect tool. But if we didn't learn how to use it effectively, it won't really give us the desired results. We need to think, research, and measure every decision. Building an app implies what's more than composing widgets and updating states. Learning is a continuous process. We learn by time and mistakes, what works and what doesn't work. Why I'm suddenly out of topic? I wanted to mention that because most of the times a developer could give up too early, thinking it's hard to do a task. Or they might think that if I know how to use the tool, then I am a developer. Flutter is a UI toolkit, which means if we don't constantly train our brains on problem solving and creative thinking, if we don't learn from mistakes and always try to challenge ourselves, we will be stuck at the first stair. So, making an app is like going upstairs. When you are a baby, you can't get up to walk at all, so you can't go upstairs either. Once you start to learn walking, you could go up 1 or 2 stairs at a maximum. Once you are older than 5, your legs have grown up. You gained enough experience to get upstairs faster. Once you are old enough and experienced enough to get upstairs faster, you can go even 2 steps at a time. So consider Flutter at the very top of these stairs. You need to give yourself some base knowledge to help you be a better developer. In Flutter, that could be by starting with Dart, the language itself, instead of jumping right to the tool. So let us now talk about actual things, wisdoms, or advices that help me do better after I learned them. Of course, there are a lot of great tips out there, but I've picked some of them for you today. Some of the things I will mention are for beginners and some are for more intermediate. It's a mix. The first advice is, if you are starting as a beginner like me, with no background in app development, or even if you have experience from some other framework or tool, you should always go over the basics first. You cannot jump right to writing essays and composing correct sentences before learning the alphabet. So here are some topics that I think is mandatory to understand at the beginning of your Flutter journey. This list isn't really comprehensive, but I think that at least you should gain knowledge on each of these topics to help you better understand your Flutter application. Features, streams, widgets, and the widget tree, of course, as they are the building blocks of any Flutter application, you need to really understand them very well. The build context object, which is really sometimes and a lot of times underestimated by a lot of developers. It's really important to understand this simple object because it plays a big role in all of your applications, Flutter applications. The widgets lifecycle, how inherited widgets work, and the declarative thinking. This tip is really, or this topic is really important, especially if you are coming from an imperative framework or tool. It's going to be a big shift for you in the way of thinking. So understanding how to shift from imperative to declarative thinking is going to help you build better applications. And lastly, the navigation. The second tip, docs and docs and docs. I cannot emphasize enough on how important it is to always refer to docs first. The people who made this tool are the people who know it better. And you are provided with an amazing resource to learn everything you need to get started. So why referring to other places before going over the documentation? It should always be your first destination. Trust me. In Flutter, we have two places where we can go to docs. The first one, and my favorite one, is the framework docs. From inside your IDE, you don't have to go outside or search online. From inside the IDE, just hold CMD and Control and hover over any widget or method, then click on it. It's going to take you to the place inside the framework where this widget or method is. And above it, you will find a comprehensive documentation explaining what this widget does, putting some examples, and even referring you to some resources to learn more about this widget. It's really helpful. It's really amazing. The second place is, of course, the online documentation. In api.flutter.dev, you will find the same framework docs, but you can search by the name of the class. If you know some name and you want to search for it directly, you can go to api.flutter.dev. It will help you find it faster. And then flutter.dev/docs, which of course has a lot of important and amazing code labs that teaches you the basic skills of building apps with Flutter. So, there is a famous sentence in the developers community that says, if it works, don't touch it. What I always like to do is the total opposite. If I have some code that works, but I don't know how it works, I touch it. And most of the times I cause it to stop working. But I understand better how it works, so I can improve it or even find better ways to achieve the same goal after I understand it. So, if it works, but you don't know how, touch it. Pub.dev is the packages manager for Flutter and Dart. We can find an insanely huge number of packages growing every single day. That there is almost a package for everything. So you can actually say that you can find a package for everything you need. But before we think of copying that package to pub/spectre.yaml, think 1,000 times, and I'm not exaggerating at all. Why is that? Let me give you some facts about packages. First, away from essential packages and platform interfaces, which has some platform code that you can't write yourself, most packages are Dart only, which means you can implement your solution by yourself, and you may even not need most of the features provided by this package. The second thing is, a package is a code written by other developers. This is a fact. When your app starts scaling bigger, you may use more packages. Some would conflict with others, like a package would conflict with another package. Some would have really old code that haven't been updated and is conflicting with newer versions of your framework or Flutter. So you are stuck at some old version because you chose to depend on someone else's code. So stop. Some packages would cause you many issues. You are outsourcing the problem, never solving it. So these are some tips I would like to do before deciding to use any package. I first ask myself, do I really need this package? Like, is it performing something that I cannot achieve myself and is really hard? Or it's Dart only and I can do it myself? If the answer is yes, I will absolutely do it myself and I won't put myself in the position where I need to depend on someone else's code. If you really need it, then take a look at the other tips. Does it have good contributors? Does the source code look healthy? Does it follow effective Dart? You really need to take a look at the source code. Some packages have a really bad source code. does it have proper up-to-date documentation? Because if you don't, like, the package could be good, but if you don't know how to use it and how to make the most out of it, and it doesn't have proper up-to-date documentation and how to configure it, sometimes it has some special configuration, it's better to stay away from this package. And recently, since null safety is now unstable, you should always ask yourself, is this package null safe? How many other packages does it depend on? Because packages can depend on other packages, so it's really gonna create some big chain of dependencies. You really need to know what packages your packages depend on, because it's gonna become the packages you like not directly are depending on those packages. And finally, how many open issues there are. So go to the GitHub repository of that package and take a look at the open issues. Are they being resolved? Are they being addressed? Are they big enough? Are they blocking the package? You really need to take a look at that. So here's an example of Flutter local notifications package. This screenshot is taken from pub.dev. And you can see, first thing, if we start looking at the top, we see that its last publishing date was March 2021, which is less than a month ago. So it's being updated regularly. That's good. It supports Android and iOS. If you're building a desktop application that will target macOS, Windows, and Linux, probably this is not going to be really good for you. But if it's just a mobile application, Android and iOS, it's perfect. We can see that it has a comprehensive documentation. It also depends on some, not a lot of packages, so that's good. It also has 120 pub points and a lot of likes. It seems like it's a Flutter favorite, so a lot of Flutter developers already use it and they love it. So it looks like a safe solution. Let's go, you can use it. Now here's another example of the opposite. Flutter progress dialog. I found this package and it seems it haven't been updated since 2 years. And it doesn't even pub couldn't even identify what platforms does this package support. So it doesn't look like a good solution. And looking at the functionality, it seems like it's a simple functionality. I mean, just a progress dialog. That's not much. You can do it yourself. It's going to be only Dart code. So such kind of packages, don't depend on them. Now make sure to always check pub points. It tells you a lot of things about this package. So if it has higher score of pub points, it means it's a good package. Now we move to another topic. In the Flutter community, we always hear a lot of things and a lot of questions about state management, and there are already many packages and solutions for state management. But trust me, if you're still a beginner, sometimes or often all you need is change notifier and provider. It's gonna fulfill most of the use cases, and they are already recommended and exist in the Flutter documentation. So you don't need nothing, you need nothing more. Just start with them, use them. And then if your app starts to scale bigger and things started to look like change notifier isn't helping you much, you can start looking for another solution. But my advice is always start with the simplest one, which should be what the platform already provides to you. The change notifier is already from the Flutter framework, so it's not like you're not going to depend on another package. So it's simple, doesn't cost you much. Try it and start with it. The best place to learn more about change notifier and how to use it in Flutter is this page from the Flutter documentation. It's a really good resource. If you are still starting with Flutter, you need to read this part from the Flutter documentation. I will be providing a link to these slides in the chat, so you can refer back to all the links I will mention. These three slashes in Dart and Flutter means documentation. So I talked previously about documentation, but now I'm mentioning it in another way. So in the way that you yourself need to use it. You need to write documentation for your own code. Now, the Flutter framework itself uses this way of writing documentation, and you can use it. So it's really helpful, and it's going to help you really much, and your future self is going to be so thankful for you, and your teammates are going to be so thankful. So every function you write, every method, every widget, above this widget or function, start writing your documentation using 3 slashes. Then anywhere you use this function or widget, once you hover over it, you can already see the explanation of this function. So it's really helpful. It saves you from going back to the function and reading the implementation code to understand what does this function does. Now, all you really need to do is hover over it and read the explanation, and that's it. You can understand what does this function do without going back to the code and reading it once more. Another tip is hold CMD control and hover over a function. You will see the implementation above the function. Like if you hover over it without holding CMD or control, you will see only the documentation. But if you held CMD and control, you're going to see above the explanation, you're going to see the implementation itself. So you don't need to go back to the source code of that function. You can read everything from the place you are using it. So it's really helpful. This is an important tip. Effective Dart is a must read. Effective Dart is a page in the Dart.dev documentation, the Dart documentation. So it's a page that contains a lot of topics talking about how to write a cleaner Dart code and a better and more effective. So go to that page, read it if you haven't yet. It's really helpful. It's really amazing. You can find it here, dart.dev/guide/language/effective Dart, or just go to dart.dev and you'll find it already, or I will be providing the links to these slides so you can go there and read it. Really, it's really good. So widgets, not methods. What does this mean? In Dart, we have 2 ways of splitting our widgets so they don't become like a huge tree of nested widgets. Sometimes you really have a lot of widgets nested inside each other that it becomes really hard to read, and you will need to take pieces of these widgets and put them outside somewhere. So you will either choose to put them in a function, so a function that returns a widget, or as a complete separate class or a widget. So it's either is going to be a method inside the same class, or a stateless widget or a stateful widget outside the class, so completely separate and could be placed in another file. My advice is always go for the second method, which is to extract your UI into widgets, not methods. Why is that? There are many reasons. Some of them would be you will get a new context. Now, this is a free, really useful thing you can gain by using another class or another widget instead of extracting to a method. A new free context means a lot. It helps you a lot. Just do it and you will thank me later. Another reason would be is that when you split your UI or extract it into functions, you are actually just placing it in the same file in the same class. You cannot take that method and place it in another file. You are still in the same class. So your file could grow like over 500, over 1000 lines of code. If your page contains a lot of UI elements, that's insane. But in case you chose to extract your widgets to to stateless or stateful widgets, separate classes. That means you can take this class, place it in another file. Now you have a much cleaner code, and you can use it in other classes. So it becomes a really usable piece of code. So all these advantages you can gain with extracting to widgets or classes, you will not gain with extracting to methods. So always go for widgets instead of classes. As you can see here, I extracted the list view into a file, so it's now usable in many places, not just in the same class. So this step, write your code for humans, not for the computer. The computer will understand only numbers, but the code you write is for you and for other humans in your teammate. So be sure to write your code for humans. So how does that look like? Look at these two boxes. So in the first one, we have both of them achieve the same result. But the first one is somehow hard to read. You will take a minute or so to understand what's the goal of this code. Meanwhile, below, we wrote extra lines of code, but it's much easier to understand. You can see, well, show something is false. It starts as a false. Then we have some model. Then if this model has an image and it's not empty, there is an image, show something is going to be true. So it took me only a few seconds to realize what does this code does. While in the top example, if you are not used to this, the question mark symbol, you will be wondering, well, what does this mean? So always follow the easiest way. Don't make it so ambiguous and just to fit everything in one line. Sometimes extra lines could mean more readability. And this is it. Don't let your file grow over, preferably 500 lines of code. If it started to go over that, try to start splitting your UI, and well, if there's some kind of logic inside your UI code, you need to take it out of there and put it in some other file. So how do I not let my file grow over 500 lines of code? These are some tips to keep your files clean. First thing, extract your widgets, always. Don't write any business logic inside your UI files. Service classes should each serve one purpose. Example, if you have a user service, that would contain all functions related to fetching, deleting, or updating users in the database. So the user service is concerned only with the user, nothing more. If some code is used twice or more, extract it into a method and reuse it. Moreover, if it's used in more than one widget, you need to extract that into a utility class so you can make use of it even outside of this project. You can use it in other projects. It's even, you can extract it, if it's really used in many projects of yours, you can extract it into your own package. So you have a package, you have a utility class, that's cool. Now, build methods should always stay clean. They only should return widgets and nothing more. Last thing is, if you are ever stuck, just go to flutter.dev and api.flutter.dev. That should be your ultimate source of truth. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and happy Flutter coding.
Thank you so much, Mais, for your presentation. I just want to say, as we're winding down our conference, this has been the best first Flutterista conference we've ever had, that we've had. And I am so thankful for everyone who's participated. Scott, again, thank you, and the rest of the Flutter community for helping us. Even though we are part of the Flutter community, you've helped us with the StreamYard and YouTube and all of that. It's amazing. Nash is in the background. Thank you, Nash. Everybody, Danielle, thank you. We've been partnering with this for months and also doing the co-managing of the organization, and it's been awesome partnership. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
I know,
before we do too much, hold on. Before we're done with this, and May's just stepped off stage there for a second, but I want to thank her.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Why can't you hear me?
No, I can hear Danielle just fine.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Then the live TV again, folks. But
yeah, now I can hear you. That was Steph. My bad.
Right. But Mais has also prepared a lot of our graphics and everything like that. So besides giving a great talk, thank you for that again, Mais.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Nash, I know I speak for Nash when I say we're really honored that you would let us into the Flutterista conference as guys. I mean, normally you would be throwing holy water or something at us.
No, we are part of a bigger community. We want to say thank you, and we want to say thank you for all your support. And we felt it was the least we could do is to make it obvious to everybody else that we really are getting support, even though the Flutteristas have been the ones that have been presenting the content and bringing stuff up, that we have been getting lots of support from the quote Flutter community. And so I think everybody now has a pretty good idea of who we are as Flutteristas. But one more time, just because I'm so proud of the job everybody's done. Can we play that video, Nash?
Hello everyone, I'm Marta and I'm a Flutterista.
Hi, I'm Anna from Ukraine. I'm senior Flutter developer and Flutterista.
I'm Steph and I'm a Flutterista.
Hola, soy Valeria y soy Flutterista.
Hi, I'm Stacey Devono and I'm a Flutterista.
Hola, desde Perú, soy Melissa y soy Flutterista.
I am Dhruva Shastri.
Hello, Neitra Morin.
Oi galera, meu nome é Jéssica.
મારું નામ ઠક્કર ખુશ્બુ છે.
Hi, my name's Shayna.
And together we're Flutteristas.
That's awesome. So if you are female, non-binary, gender fluid, and have a passion for Flutter, and you want to join the Flutteristas, we're going to have a link put up here on the screen. Please go and fill out the form. We will see you. So leave that up. And then now we're going to be joined by,
Eleni. We're going to bring Eleni in to give us the last
Eleni's
final
gonna
update.
come in and she's going to give us our map update. It's exciting to find out, wow, all of the people that have attended are all over the world. Tell us about it.
Yes, so we covered 44 countries around the world. The place with the most people is India, and followed by United States, and then Brazil. That's really exciting. It's so many places.
Thank you, Eleni, for putting this together.
Yes,
really,
that was awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Now, how do we figure out who came from the furthest? That's what I want to know. Is how do we figure out who came from the furthest for the conference?
Well, we're all virtual, so I don't know how we would do that.
Maybe just north of Indonesia, there's that tiny little island. Who's that?
Right. Okay, it's a joke.
Philippines,
it's a joke, of course, but
or Singapore.
Well, thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for your awesome work. Yeah, it was amazing.
And now we're going to have Sarah come in, and Sarah has contest announcements, or contest winners announcements. Wow, sorry.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
Hi. Let me put this in presentation mode. So we had a bunch of activities today, and some of them were just for fun, but some of them had winners. So let's go through what we did and the winners. So first of all, there was a tweet contest, and we haven't had time to go through all the tweets, so we will announce those winners tomorrow. The scavenger hunt by the Act Company had some great response, and they told us that these were the winners of the various prize categories. So 3 people got the Code Pure 30-day subscription. Another 2 lucky winners got $100 gift cards to the @sign company, and then those 5 got $10 gift cards. And we will reach out to you all soon to coordinate how you can collect those gifts.
And just so it's clear, if you're not aware, those are your ticket numbers.
Yes.
So if you have your ticket, you'll know by looking at your ticket the number if you were one of those winners or any of the others that she's going to be discussing.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. I should have said that. It's 1:45 a.m. here and my brain is mush.
Well, thank you so much for staying up and helping us with this. Thank you, Sarah.
You've only been doing this for 19 hours. Come on. It's not like you have children to wrangle too.
Yeah, in about 4 hours. But anyways, next we had the Code Lab by Stream, which was awesome. And they got their submissions by Twitter. So instead of ticket IDs, I have Twitter handles for you. Yes, and the Google form, sorry. But then all the winners were on Twitter, so here they are. And you will be contacted shortly. So thank you for joining. They had great participation. I think it was very exciting. Okay, next. Yes, there. You will be getting some sweet stuff. I want that backpack. It looks really nice. Anyways, no, it's okay. Right, so then there was the Flutter Challenge mini app challenge, which happened prior to the conference. So the Flutter Challenge team had about 16 hours to evaluate all of the submissions, and this is what they came up with. Unfortunately, the Flutter Challenge team and their enthusiasm for respecting people's privacy doesn't have your email address. So if you're here, please reach out to the flutter.challenge.team@gmail.com to share your contact info so we can get you your prizes. But congratulations to all of the winners here. There were some very creative entries, and I know
one lucky Dash winner.
And a lucky Dash winner. I know that they were.
If they can provide an email address.
Not that the book in Andre's course isn't important, but you know, Dash is so coveted around the world. So yes,
he is. He's priceless. So there is a number. Intel Raja got Dash, and I saw this submission. It was very cool. So, okay, moving on. Then we had the quiz, and these were done by Ticket ID. So someone didn't listen to the instructions. So if you are Mirko, please email to that email address, and then you will get the thing. And if you don't email us by, say, I don't know, Tuesday, we'll give it to the next person. So, okay. And next, then we had the Flutterista quiz. Someone was very lucky to get the Ray Wenderlich Ultimate Pro subscription for a year. That sounds awesome. And then second and third place got Dash, and then fourth through eighth place got the Flutter and Firebase course. Again, we had some people that did not enter their ticket numbers, and we have no way of knowing who you are or contacting you unless you reach out to us. So Ambriel and Heartstorm, you have until Tuesday to email here. And I hope you do, but if you don't, then there are some backups. And we will reach out to people soon to let you know about how you can get your prizes. Okay, almost done. there were the raffle winners. So if you are in this big block at the top, you are given a voucher for a Google Cloud certification training course that has a $500 value. And we will reach out to you soon. And then also these 3 here got a t-shirt. And then there were 5 people that won books from O'Reilly. They can choose whatever book they want, I believe. So we will also reach out to you soon. And I think, yes, the virtual escape room, we are still evaluating that. So we will get back to the participants early next week. And I believe that is the last one. It is. So thank you, everybody, for engaging with us in this whole conference. I think I had a lot of fun. And I hope you did too.
Thank you, Sarah, for a bunch of amazing activities.
Yes, thank you. That was awesome.
Thanks.
So we did it. We have the first Flutterista conference done. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, everyone, for participating. All of our speakers. We definitely couldn't have done it without you. And thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to those on the screen with me. I greatly appreciate you being here for part 4. And Sarah, we totally did it. And Sarah can now go to bed.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah can go to bed. And before we're done, I definitely want to say a couple things.
Yes.
And so I would like to, first off, everybody, this is Dorian. So you saw Sarah's poll question about our pets coding with us. And, my little buddy does all the time. And we love it. And so he asked if he could come on camera. And I said, of course. And so here we are. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Because, a conference doesn't mean much, is wonderful. And I really, really want to thank you for that. And this whole thing started because, we as Flutteristas, our group, we had some speaker training. And when we did that, that was really cool. We were doing it, but kind of why are we doing it? And we were doing it so we could start talking. And so just popped into my head, we should have a conference. And I mentioned it to a few people and everybody was like, yes, we should. Yes, we should. And then I kind of got out of the way and people have done an amazing job to put together this conference. I think you will all agree that it was an awesome set of content. And I have to thank all of our speakers. I have to thank all of our organizers. I have to thank all of our committees that we had. And I'm just moved that we were able to pull this off. And so I'm just, now I'm gonna probably sleep for a week, but I'm very, very, very much in awe that the community is this good and that our local part of the Flutteristas are that good. And I plan on having more Flutterista conferences, but I also plan on you seeing a lot of these Flutteristas speaking at other conferences. And I look forward to that. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody, everybody that's involved.
I think somebody else we want to thank is our moderators. One thing that we've had moderators monitoring the comments in the live stream. And there were people who weren't playing by the rules that were discussed at the beginning, and our moderators took care of that. And I want to thank them for that because this is supposed to be a safe space and they helped us make that. So thank you to all of them. And one more time, can we put up the link to, if you're interested in joining the Flutteristas, female, non-binary, gender fluid with a passion for flutters, please go there and join. And one last time to see our sponsors and our contributors.
That's right. And that's
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I think now Nash is going to show us the who's our behind the scenes guy. By the way, you'll see his name coming up here, but I think he's going to show what we've got going on, and that'll and that's going to end it. It's a wrap.
Thank you.